Hello everyone, I have a very interesting endgame study here. It's white to move and win the game. So you see that white has a rook and three pawns, while black has one, two, three, four, five pawns, and this pawn is ready to queen. So for your orientation, this pawn is going this way, and this pawn is going this way. So what's the problem here? The problem is that white cannot stop this pawn from queening. Right, it's not, I mean, it's very difficult. And even if captures this pawn with the rook, there is this pawn which is coming unopposed, so none of white's pawns can move. This pawn is blockaded, and these pawns are doubled, so they can't move. And even if the rook captures this pawn, black wins. So what's how should white proceed in this position? So the winning move is rook f7. Okay, so rook f7, and why not rook h1? You may think, because if rook h1, then king h1, then king f2, h5, king f1, h4, king f2, king f1, and then this kind of locks the position, and white can hope for a draw. But then b5 and then a5, b4. White cannot capture. The moment white captures, it's a draw. A into b4, and then b5. So if white captures en passant, it's a draw. If white moves, it's still a draw. But if white moves the king, then white loses, because the black king comes and then he queens the pawn. Right. So rook f7 is the move. Uh, After rook h1, uh, king h1. If you go king f2, then h5. King f1, h4, king f2, h3, king f1, and again b5. You cannot capture. If you capture, it's a draw. a5, b4. Again, you cannot capture. A takes b4. If you don't do a takes b4, you can also play a6, but then b takes a6, and then a takes b4, and then a5. You cannot capture, because if you capture, it's a draw. Then b5, a4, b6, a3, b7, a2, b8 queen, and a1 queen, and black is winning. Right, in this case, white will even lose the game. So white has to be very careful not to throw the game away. So let's go to the starting position. So rook h1 is clearly not the right move, and I'll explain why rook h1 does not work uh, more deeply in some time. So rook f7 is the move. And here black cannot queen, because if h1 queen, then rook g7 check, king h3, rook into h7, we get rid of the problematic pawn, king g2, rook into h1, king into h1, and king d3. So white wins. So after rook f7, black cannot do h1 queen. Okay, and again, if you do h6, then rook f2 check, and white holds. So after rook f7, it has to go h5. Okay, now the rook comes back. Rook f2 check, king g3, rook f1, stopping promotion, king g2, and now rook h1. Because now this in this position, rook h1 is winning for white, but in this position, rook h1 is not winning, and there is a difference. I'll tell you the difference. So after rook h1, king into h1, king f2, not king f1, because if you play king f1 after king into h1, if you play king f1, then h4, king f2, h3, king f1, b5, you cannot capture, because if you capture, black will simply play b6 and it's a draw. So a5, b4, again you cannot capture, a6, b takes a6, a takes b4, a5, again you cannot capture, because if you capture, it's a draw. b5, a4, b6, a3, b7, a2, b8. White gets the queen, but black also gets the queen, and black is winning. Right. So the point of this exercise is that, let's go to the starting position back again. This is the starting position. White king white king has to stay in the f2 square, not in the f1 square. If white king stays in the f2 square, if he stays here, then white is able to win. But if the white king stays in the f1 square, then white loses. Okay, because ultimately black will queen in the b file or a file, and then it will come with check, which white has to avoid to win the game. So let's continue. Rook f7, h5, rook f2, king g3, rook f1, king g2, rook h1, king h1, king f2, h4, king f1, h3, king f2. So this is the key square where the white king has to be. Now before the pawn push starts, now black has to move a pawn. And when the pawn is moved, the king wants to stay in f2, not in f1, because if it stays in f1, then it loses. So before the pawn push, the king has to go to the f2 square. Now b5, the only move. You cannot capture, because if you capture, then b3 and it's a draw. So a5, b4, again you cannot capture. a6, b takes a6. If you play b takes a3, then a takes b7, a2, b8 queen, a1 queen. Now notice that this queen does not come with check. Queen b7 is mate. So black cannot go b takes a3, it has to go b takes a6, and then a takes b4, a5. Again you cannot capture, because if you capture, it's a draw. So b5, a4, b6, a3, b7, a2, b8, a1, and queen b7 mate. So what's the difference between rook h1 in this position and rook h1 in this position? There's a difference. So let's see the position again. Rook h1 here and rook h1 here. So here in the previous position, this is not correct, because in this case black has 1, 2, 3, 4 moves with this pawn, which white has to avoid. But in this position, black has only 2 moves with the pawn. This makes the whole difference. So let's go back. Here, rook h1 and king h1, king f1. Because if you go king f2, then h5, king f1, h4, king f2, h3, king f1, and again b5, a5, b4, a takes b4, and then b5, it's a draw. So king f2, after rook h1, here king f2 does not work. King into h1, you have to go king f1 and then h6. Now king f2, h5, king f1, h4, king f2, king h3, and now the king is going to f1. After all the pawn moves are made, this is the critical position. The white king has to go to f1, and then starts the problem, because like I have said, the king has to be on f2 before any pawn is pushed. Now the pawns are starting to get pushed. b5, a5, b4, a takes b4, b5, and it's a draw. If a6, then b takes a6, and white may even lose the game. If he pushes, he'll lose. Okay, so the king has to be in f2 to secure the win. So for that, in the starting position, rook h1 does not work, because black has 1, 2, 3, 4 moves, which does not allow the king to be on f2, because the white king is also does not have any other move than moving the king. So in this position, rook h1 does not work, because this pawn has 4 moves. But in this position rook h1 works, because this pawn has 2 moves. That makes all the difference. So let's go back and see the problem once again. The winning move is rook f7 and then h5. If h6, then rook f2 again, so h5. If h1 queen, then rook g7, king h3, rook h7, king g2, rook into h1, king into h1, and king d3. So white wins. So rook f7 and then h5, and then the rook comes back, rook f2, king g3, and then rook f1, king g2, and now you play rook h1. Okay, and then king h1. So after rook h1, if h4, then king e1, h3, and king e2. This is even worse. After king into h1, the king will go to f2, not f1. So it doesn't make any difference if you play h4. So after rook h1, you have to go king h1 and then king f2. Again, king f1 will be a terrible mistake. It looks as if the same, but it's not the same, right? So if king f1, then h4, king f2, h3, and then again the king lands upon f1 square, and then starts the problem. b5, a5, b4, a6, b takes a6, a4, a takes b4, a5, b5, a4, b6, a3, b7, a2, b8, and a1 queen, and black wins. So the king has to go to f2 in this position, not f1. And then h4, king f1, h3, and now the king reaches f2 before any pawns are starting to get pushed, and this is a winning position for white. b5, a5, b4, a6, b takes a6, a takes b4, a5, b5, a4, b6, a3, b7, a2, b8, the black queens, but this does not come with check, which is the entire point of the king f2 thing, and then queen b7 is made. I hope you like the study.